it's Jenny from Trees for Tomorrow in Eagle River, Wisconsin, and I am here to talk to you all today about bird adaptations. We have about 9,000 species of birds in the world, and they all do share some very common characteristics. The things that they do have in common are, as you can kind of see from my feathered friends that are sitting here with me, is that all birds have feathers. They're the only animal to have feathers. So that is unique to birds, but they all have feathers. They all have two wings. We know that some birds don't use them for flying, but they still have wings. All birds have a beak or a bill. And as you can see, birds is that they all have a little bit of a different shape to their beak or bill, which we will talk about in a little bit. They also all have two legs and 2 feet. And their feet look very different based on the habitat that they live in. A couple of other kind of cool facts that all birds share is that they are warm-blooded, or what we call in the science world endothermic. And all birds also hatch from hard-shelled eggs. But every species or family of birds looks a little bit different, even though they share all of those same characteristics. They have different characteristics because they are adapted to live in different habitats throughout the world. I'm here to talk to you about some of those specific adaptations. So what I would like to ask you all is, what do you think an adaptation is, or how would you define the word adaptation? And feel free to kind of take a minute. You can pause my video and sort of see if you can answer that in your own words, because it's kind of fun for us to answer questions like that in our own words to see how much you know. An adaptation can be defined in a lot of different ways, but here at Trees for Tomorrow, we define an adaptation in regards to animals as something an animal has or does that helps them survive in their environment. So a lot of those physical characteristics that I just talked about makes or helps a bird adapt and survive in its environment. But that can also be behaviors. So things like migration. We know a lot of birds migrate. That is a behavior or an adaptation that helps them survive. And in some other animals, it might be hibernation. That is also an adaptation that helps some animals survive in their environment. Okay, so we just talked about general bird adaptations and how all birds share certain characteristics. But today what I really want to talk to you about is a really unique family of birds that we have here in the Northwoods. They're fairly common. We have about 8 species of these kinds of birds, and that's the family of the woodpecker. I have one species here. This is our largest species of woodpecker. This is the pileated woodpecker. And I really like woodpeckers. They're one of my favorite family of birds to just watch for, listen for. They just have a lot of really cool adaptations that make them very unique birds. So we'll talk a little bit more about what makes them unique. So the first thing that you'll notice about woodpeckers in this picture, but also just like if you've ever been walking in the woods or maybe in your yard, you hear a woodpecker pecking at a tree. Obviously, the sound of the pecking is louder if the bird is bigger, like this pileated woodpecker. But that pecking at a tree is called drumming. And woodpeckers drum to look for food. They are what we call omnivores. So many of them eat insects, and they peck at trees, dead ones and live ones, to get that larvae of beetles or bugs. But also woodpeckers eat sap. We have a woodpecker here called a yellow-bellied sapsucker. So they will lap up the sap in a tree, but they also eat berries, acorns, things like that. So when they drum on a tree, you might think, well, why don't they get a headache? Like that would be equivalent to you and I kind of like running full speed at a tree trunk and smacking our head against a tree trunk. And we know that that would not end well for us. So how does a woodpecker do it? Well, They have these very large heads, and their skulls are very spongy and absorb the impact of when they're constantly pecking at that tree trunk. They also have very strong neck muscles that also allow them to constantly drum at a tree without it bothering them at all. The other thing that helps them with that drumming is that you can see that they have very sharp, kind of chisel-shaped beaks. So remember I said earlier that all birds have beaks or bills and they're all shaped differently. And a woodpecker definitely has almost like a knife for a nose or a beak. And I want to just take a minute to talk about the tongue of a woodpecker because they're pretty fascinating and this is one of the coolest adaptations they have. So depending on what the woodpecker eats, their tongue is going to be a little bit different. Some species of woodpecker have a tongue that's up to 3 times as long as their bill. 3 times as long. So you might be wondering, well, where do they keep a tongue that long? They find a beetle or a larvae, they extend that tongue into the hole that they've just drummed into the tree, and then when they retract their tongue, it actually wraps around their skull. And there's a nice little, almost like pocket in their skull that their tongue sits in. Other woodpecker tongues, like our sapsucker I just mentioned a few minutes ago, has almost like barbs, like barbed wire on the end of its tongue. And that's so that when it like licks or laps up the sap, or some woodpeckers that eat insects also have those barbs, that helps the bugs or whatever they're after in that tree stick to their tongue, and they can just simply like catch it on the end of that hook and down it goes into their belly. The other thing that you might notice is that their tail feathers are very long and stiff. So woodpeckers are unique in that they can kind of crawl up the tree and down the tree and kind of around the tree. And their tail feathers, you can see, help them stabilize. So they have very long, stiff tail feathers. So if you ever see a woodpecker in your yard or in a walk in the woods, just take a moment to observe how their tail feathers are helping them stay on that tree. And then the last thing I just want to mention, I mean, there's so many adaptations we could talk about woodpeckers, but the very last thing I do want to point out, because it is important, is their feet. So actually right here, I have a woodpecker foot. And the cool thing about woodpecker feet is that they are adapted to have 2 toes pointing forward and 2 toes pointing backward, almost like the shape of an X. In science, we call that zygodactyl. It's like an X shape. And basically what that helps them do is it helps them climb up the tree and climb down the tree. And with my picture, you can see how this pileated woodpecker's foot is helping it kind of stay just on the side of that tree. So those are just some unique adaptations of woodpeckers. The best way to start learning about birds, whether it's woodpeckers or any other kind of bird, is to just start observing them even out your own kitchen or bedroom window. And a really fun way to do that is to just look at what birds are coming to your bird feeder. And if you don't have a bird feeder, I'm going to show you how to make a really easy, fun one. You probably have a lot of the materials right at home. You can hang it up and start birding.
All right, so here we are. We're gonna be making our pine cone bird feeders so that we can start to invite the birdies into our yard and just start learning a little bit more about what birds we have living in our own yards. So I have a special helper with me today. This is Ava. And she's actually holding up our finished product. All right, thank you, Ava. So the first thing I just want to do is just kind of explain to you what you might need to do this bird feeder. And actually, it's really simple. You probably already have a lot of these materials right at home with you. And if you don't, I bet they're pretty easy for you to find. You are going to need some pine cones. So a pine cone about like that size. So these are big pine cones from a white pine tree. Maybe you have one in your yard, or even, you know, maybe take a hike and grab some bigger pine cones. The bigger ones are going to work better just because they're going to be sturdy for our feathered friends. You also need some scissors. Today we're using peanut butter. Peanut butter is a good, nutritious, high energy, high fat snack for birds. In the summer they don't need it as much, but especially as we get to colder weather, this is a great treat for birds to have. If you have a peanut allergy or any kind of other nut allergy, obviously do not use peanut butter. Another alternative is something like a vegetable shortening, or maybe some of you know it as Crisco. There's lots of different off-brands of that, and you can find that in your baking aisle at the grocery store. And maybe you have it already at home. So that's a great alternative if you have any kind of nut allergy. And also, if you don't have peanut butter, any kind of nut butter will work just fine for this. So the other thing that you're going to need is some twine or some heavy duty yarn to hang your finished product. The thing about using twine is that it is biodegradable, and it will eventually just decompose and become part of the earth, which is really nice. And then right next to that we have some bird seed. Any kind of bird seed you have at home will be fine. This is just a mixture of sunflower seeds. There's some nuts in there. So again, if you have a nut allergy, just be cautious of that. But other alternatives could be thistle or millet, or just the black sunflower seeds. And then obviously you can see that I've got some paper plates and some butter knives, so that, or something to spread out your peanut butter. This can be a very messy project. So if you're going to do it inside, maybe ask an adult for some help. Put down some newspaper on your table. But the other great thing about this is, why don't you just take it outside, right? Another great excuse to be outside on a nice sunny day and to just do something fun out in your own yard, which is where we are. All right, Ava, if you want to grab that big pine cone there. What we did first, before we even started filming, is I cut out 2 pieces of twine, okay? And what we did is we just tied either end of the pine cone. We just wrapped it around, okay, and tied a couple, 2-3 knots on either side, and then we joined those 2 strings up at the top here, and again into 2 to 3 knots, so that when you hang it in the tree, it's going to be nice and sturdy for the birds, okay? So the next thing you want to do is you want to grab your knife, and you want to just start spreading your peanut butter. And when you spread your peanut butter into the pine cone, you want to get into the little nooks and crannies of that pine cone, okay? So it's going to work a lot better to just spread the peanut butter instead of rolling it in the peanut butter. That's going to get super messy. We found that this works a little bit better is if you just take a knife or some other kind of, you know, maybe small rubber spatula, and just really kind of spread that peanut butter in there. So the kinds of birds that are going to be attracted to a feeder like this are going to be woodpeckers, which is what we just learned about, nuthatches, both white and red-breasted, chickadees, maybe blue jays, and you may even get some other birds that you might not expect to eat this kind of thing too. So it's just a really fun way to, you know, start observing and learning a bit more about birds. All right, so Ava's got her peanut butter. And you can see it's all good and drippy and gooey. So what she's going to do next is she is going to just take it and she's going to roll it into the bird seed. So it's really nice if you can get a paper plate or some other kind of maybe plate or tin, and just dump a bunch of bird seed onto the plate. And then it's just going to be really easy for you to roll that pine cone into that bird seed. And you can see that Ava isn't afraid to get in there and sprinkle that bird seed into those nooks and crannies of where all that yummy peanut butter is. And then when you feel like you have enough on there, you can hold it up. There we go. So we showed you a finished product in the beginning, But here's Ava's that she just did, and you can see it just takes a couple minutes to do this. And then when you're done, we'll go find a good sturdy branch to hang it on. We'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully we'll see some bird friends visit our bird feeder. All right. Thank you, Ava. Have fun, guys.
Hi, I'm Jenny, and I'm an educator here at Trees for Tomorrow, and I'm here with Greta, one of our animal ambassadors. I'm here in Eagle River on Trees for Tomorrow's campus, and I hope that you enjoyed our program today. Trees for Tomorrow is a nonprofit natural resources specialty school. We were founded in 1944 as a reforestation effort by the pulp and paper industries. Today our focus is on educating the next generation about sustainability and our role as stewards to our natural resources. Funding for Trees for Tomorrow is a combination of program fees, corporate sponsorships, grants, and donations from individuals like you. If you found value in today's program, please consider making a donation to Trees for Tomorrow by visiting our website and clicking on the Donate Now button at the top right corner. We also encourage you to follow us on social media and share your experiences exploring the outdoors. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode.